welcome to The Debate. So, imagine you finally have like a quiet evening to yourself.
A rare occurrence these days.
Very rare. But you sit down in your living room, you pick up a slightly out-of-tune acoustic guitar, or maybe, I don't know, a lump of modeling clay, and you just start messing around.
Okay, sounds relaxing.
Right, it should be. But sitting right next to you on the couch, just staring at you, is this man in a gray suit holding a stopwatch and a clipboard.
Oh, I know this guy.
Yeah, he is the ghost of the industrial efficiency expert. And he's leaning over, asking you, what is the ROI of this? Could you sell this on Etsy? Like, is this building your personal brand?
It is a terrifying image, and frankly, a highly accurate representation of modern leisure. I mean, we have invited that ghost right into our most private sanctuaries.
We really have, and it's exactly what we're doing to ourselves. So today, we are asking a simple question with, well, pretty complex psychological consequences. Have we forgotten how to be useless? Our discussion today centers on the cultural devaluation of hobbies in modern life and the psychological necessity of reclaiming our leisure time. But where we diverge, I think, is on where the true value of a hobby actually lies.
Right.
I will argue that hobbies are essential precisely because they are autotelic, meaning they are done purely for their own sake. And their primary power comes from providing a refuge of absolute uselessness, away from the demands of the market.
And I will argue that defining our hobbies merely by their, uselessness or as a simple escape actually minimizes their power. I believe a hobby's ultimate value is found in cognitive synergy.
Cognitive synergy?
Yes. The way it actively cross-trains our brains, builds deep resilience, and develops transferable skills that integrate into and elevate our broader lives.
Okay, well, let's just look at the cultural landscape right now. It is deeply infected with what we might call productivity bias.
Sure.
We live in an era where literally every sliver of human existence is treated as a resource to be, like, strip-mined for value. We are completely crushed under the side hustle tax.
The side hustle tax.
Yeah, which is this unspoken cultural rule that if you are good at something, you are morally obligated to sell it.
The pressure is relentless. I completely agree. If you knit, you supposedly need an Etsy shop.
Yes.
If you play piano, you need a TikTok channel to showcase it. It's exhausting.
Exactly. We judge every single activity by its return on investment. Therefore, an activity that produces nothing of economic or social value is viewed as frivolous. So my position is that the greatest psychological benefit of a hobby is that it serves as a safe sandbox for incompetence.
A sandbox for incompetence?
Right. In a world defined by performance reviews and metrics and missed KPIs, unmonetized time is the only space where we can reclaim ownership of our minds precisely because it produces nothing of value to the economy. The uselessness is the feature, it's not the bug.
I mean, I agree entirely that the side hustle tax is a cultural malignancy. It exhausts us. But I see the appeal of your framing. And my concern is that treating the antidote as a full embrace of, uselessness is a misdiagnosis.
How so? I mean, if the disease is the demand for usefulness, shouldn't the cure be the absence of it?
Not quite. Look, when we define hobbies merely as an escape from work or as a sanctuary of incompetence, like you said, we strip them of their active, restorative power.
Strip them of it?
Yeah. My perspective is that hobbies are fundamentally a form of cognitive diversity. When you engage in a pure, active hobby, you are engaging entirely different neural pathways from your daily professional routines. This isn't just about hiding from the efficiency expert.
Then what is it about?
It is about hidden synergy. The tactile, unmonetized pursuits we engage in actively fuel our creativity, our capacity for systemic iteration, and our resilience in completely different domains. A hobby is an engine for human development, not just a hiding place from capitalism.
Okay, well, if we accept that the side hustle tax is ruining our leisure, it begs the question, what is actually happening in our brains when we finally turn that pressure off? Because I think this is where our paths diverge mechanically.
Let's get into the mechanics then.
We both recognize that there is a massive difference between active leisure and passive entertainment.
Oh, absolutely. Endless scrolling or binge watching an entire season of television, that is merely temporary stimulation.
Exactly.
It numbs fatigue, it helps us hide from time, but it doesn't actually restore cognitive function.
Right. Hobbies require us to engage with time. They provide deep cognitive restoration. And I trace this restoration directly to psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow.
Ah, flow.
Yeah, flow is that state of intense focus where self-consciousness essentially dissolves. You lose track of time entirely. I argue that hobby flow is restorative, specifically because it lacks external requirements. It is a sanctuary of the autotelic. Your brain finally gets to exhale because there is no audience, no algorithm, and no price tag. The restoration happens because the pressure to perform is completely removed from the equation.
Well, flow is certainly essential, but let's look at what that actually means on a neurological level. I locate the mechanism of restoration somewhere else entirely.
Okay, where?
Flow is restorative, not simply because it lacks a price tag, but because it shifts the brain from a state of low engagement consumption to high focus production.
You mean the act of making something physical?
Yes, making or doing. Modern life forces us into a low information diet crisis. We're constantly ingesting curated content, emails, feeds, videos.
Oh yeah, constantly.
And this high consumption, low creation loop leaves our prefrontal cortex completely drained. When you step into a hobby, you flip that script mechanically. You are doing or making instead of watching someone else build or cook.
Right.
It demands your physical presence and analog attention. That acts as a natural firewall against digital overstimulation. The brain doesn't rest by doing nothing. It rests by doing something different.
I hear you, but
So the restoration doesn't come from the absence of pressure. It comes from the presence of active, self-directed production.
see, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because if production is the key, right? If the goal is to shift into this high-focus creation mode, why is there such heavy psychological emphasis on the joy of being terrible at something?
What do you mean?
Well, let's take the classic pandemic cliché.
Oh no, are we talking about...
Baking sourdough, yes. There's this championing of the act of baking a sourdough loaf that resembles a literal brick.
True, a lot of bricks were baked.
Or playing a guitar chord that sounds like a dying cat. If the restorative power comes from production, producing a brick is a failure of production. It's objectively bad.
Sure, on a technical level.
But in my framework, producing badly is the entire point. The act of failing without consequence is what detaches our self-worth from perfection. It proves to the nervous system that you can do something poorly and still survive.
Okay, but
And that is incredibly therapeutic for anyone burned out by perfectionism at work.
I might come at it from a different way. You are glorifying the beginner phase, which is an important entry point. Yes, it absolutely requires vulnerability. But stopping there, staying deliberately incompetent, is actually a symptom of the very productivity bias we are trying to fight.
Wait, how is staying incompetent a symptom of productivity bias? That seems entirely contradictory.
Because why do adults embrace the dying cat guitar chord and then quit 2 weeks later? It happens all the time.
Because life gets busy?
No, because they hit the wall of mastery. That is that early, unglamorous period of patient repetition where cognitive load is highest. Modern life is so engineered for instant gratification that when we don't immediately see a return on our time investment, when the guitar chord keeps sounding awful day after day, we quit. We mistake a temporary lack of skill for a permanent lack of interest.
Now, I know anyone listening who works a 50-hour week is probably thinking, you want me to come home and do more work by scaling a wall of mastery? I'm already exhausted.
And it is a completely valid objection. I get it. But here is why that active effort is actually less exhausting than binge watching Netflix.
Color me skeptical, but go on.
When you push through that initial frustration, your brain begins to lay down new myelin sheaths along those neural pathways. You build an internal feedback loop of actual improvement. You get a dopamine release not from an algorithm, but from your own developing competence.
So the brain rewards the effort.
Exactly. The psychological buffer against the demands of the world isn't built by remaining incompetent. It's built by proving to yourself that you can master a skill entirely on your own terms, without a boss telling you how to do it.
But the danger of that wall of mastery framework is that it begins to look suspiciously like work.
How so?
The moment you tell someone that the true value of their leisure time is hidden behind a wall of unglamorous repetition and that they need to build an internal feedback loop of improvement, you are reintroducing the vocabulary of optimization. You are essentially telling them to optimize their fun.
I wouldn't call it optimizing fun. I'd call it recognizing human nature. Human beings are inherently teleological. We are wired to seek growth.
Are we always, though?
Yes. When you carve a wooden spoon, you naturally want the next spoon to be a little smoother. That isn't the industrial efficiency expert talking. That is just our intrinsic desire for craftsmanship.
I see the desire for craftsmanship, sure, but I look at the necessity of vulnerability here. Engaging in a new hobby as an adult requires a level of comfort with being unserious or even eccentric.
Eccentric is a good word for it.
Right, because we reserve all our societal respect for ambition at scale. The person who tends a tiny garden or plays the piano in their basement for absolutely no audience is engaging in a radical act simply because they are defying the mandate to achieve.
Okay.
The moment we say, you must push past the beginner phase to get the real neurological value, we rob them of the joy of just tinkering.
That feels like a false binary to me. Tinkering is wonderful, but tinkering naturally leads to competence if you stay with it. And this brings us to how hobbies shape our identity out in the wider world, which is arguably their most protective feature.
Protective?
Yes. When you push past the wall of mastery, you build an alternative dimension of self. If your identity is anchored entirely to your job title, you are psychologically fragile. If work goes poorly, the self collapses.
Right, we can agree on that.
But if you have spent time developing real competence in a hobby, you possess cognitive diversity. The skills and the identity you build in your hobby actively bleed into and elevate your professional life.
Okay, let's pause right there, because I completely disagree with the idea that these identities should bleed into one another. In fact, I argue for identity segregation as a deliberate defense mechanism.
Segregation? Meaning they never touch?
Exactly. Think of the structural engineering of a massive ship. They are built with watertight compartments, right?
Like the Titanic.
Well, hopefully better than the Titanic. But if the ship hits an iceberg and the hull is breached in one area, the water only floods that specific compartment. The ship doesn't sink because the rest of the vessel is sealed off.
I see where you're going.
A hobby creates a stabilizing identity precisely because it is completely siloed from the rest of your life. You are a woodworker or you are a chess player, and that identity exists in a hermetically sealed, watertight vault.
Okay.
So if a person's professional life completely collapses, they are laid off, their industry goes under, the hobbyist identity remains untouched. It survives because it shares zero DNA with the professional identity. The internal feedback loop of the hobby is a life raft because it is completely unconnected to the mainland.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the explicit evidence of transferable skills we see in psychological profiling?
Transferable skills again.
Yes, because the identities are not perfectly siloed. And assuming they are deprives us of the holistic benefits of leisure. Look at the concept of hidden synergy. You have a data analyst who takes up writing fiction on the weekends. Those identities don't sit in isolated vaults. They interact.
I have to admit, I'm getting a bit lost here. I want to understand this mechanism. If I spend my weekend writing a fantasy novel about dragons, how does that magically make me better at analyzing financial spreadsheets on Monday? I just don't see the bridge between those two things.
It's a great question, and it comes down to cognitive cross-training.
Cross-training?
Right. Your data analysis job relies heavily on the brain's analytical, convergent thinking centers. You are looking for a single right answer in a sea of numbers. When you do that for 40 hours a week, those specific neural pathways become exhausted.
Oh, certainly.
But when you write fiction, you are activating divergent narrative networks. You are dealing with ambiguity, human motivation, and character arcs.
Okay, I follow the shift in brain activity.
Right. So when you go back to the data on Monday, your analytical brain is rested. But more importantly, the narrative reasoning you practiced over the weekend bleeds over. You start looking at the spreadsheet not just as raw numbers, but as a story. You learn to see the human behaviors and motivations hidden behind the data trends. Or consider a programmer who takes up woodworking.
The classic move from digital to analog.
Exactly. When you write abstract code all day, you are exhausting your prefrontal cortex's capacity for linguistic abstract logic. Woodworking forces the brain's spatial reasoning and motor control centers to light up.
Because you have to physically measure and cut.
Yes, you are learning physical lessons in structure, stability, and tangible trial and error that abstract code on a screen simply cannot provide. The amateur cook learns systemic iteration, which translates directly into better project management at the office. The identities integrate.
Interesting.
The hobby acts as a cross-training facility for the mind, and the capabilities built there elevate the person in every aspect of their life.
I see where you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Doesn't framing a hobby as a tool for better project management or strategic thinking quietly invite the man with the clipboard right back into our living room?
I don't think it does, because the intention.
But you've just justified the hobby by pointing out how it makes the worker more effective at their job.
Well,
You're giving people permission to rest by saying, oh, it's okay that I spent 4 hours baking bread because it taught me systemic iteration, which I can use in my marketing meeting on Monday.
I'm not saying it has to be a conscious justification.
But that is just the optimization trap wearing a disguise. If we justify our leisure by how it synergizes with our productivity, we haven't escaped the productivity cult at all. We've just found a more sophisticated, neurologically backed way to serve it.
I understand the fear of instrumentalizing play. It's a valid concern. But acknowledging a benefit is not the same as making it the primary goal. I am not saying you should take up chess so that you become better at strategic decision-making at work.
No?
I am saying that because you deeply engage with chess for its own sake, you inevitably develop strategic thinking that enriches your whole life.
So it's a side effect rather than the objective.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the profound systemic impact of active leisure. When you treat a hobby as merely a safe space to be useless, you ironically adopt society's dismissive attitude toward it.
Really? Dismissive?
Yes, you agree with society that it has no real value. I am arguing that it has immense, tangible value. It just happens to be a value that isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in cognitive energy, creative capacity, and resilience.
But the invisibility of that value is exactly what protects it.
What do you mean?
The benefits of a hobby, the lower cortisol levels, the emotional regulation, the quiet resilience we get from our watertight compartments are largely invisible. They don't show up on a resume, and you can't really talk about them at a networking party without sounding eccentric.
True.
And that invisibility is crucial. The moment you make the value visible, the moment you articulate it as cognitive cross-training, you subject it to evaluation. You open it up to being judged.
I don't think it has to be judged.
I want to keep it invisible. The fact that society thinks it's useless is the exact camouflage that allows the hobbyist to actually find peace.
But keeping it invisible and calling it useless is exactly why people abandon their hobbies when life gets busy. Think about the psychology of prioritization. When time gets tight, what is the first thing to go? The thing we've labeled useless.
Oof, that is a fair point. We cut the things we think don't matter.
Always. If we don't recognize the active, synergistic power of our hobbies, we won't prioritize them. We will sacrifice them on the altar of urgent emails and household chores.
Yeah, I've done that.
We all have. We need to strategically reframe hobbies as a vital investment in our cognitive health. We need to internally track the non-financial returns, the hours relaxed, the new spatial pathways built, the analog attention restored. If we don't elevate the status of the hobby in our own minds by recognizing its profound developmental benefits, we will inevitably lose it to the demands of the modern world.
I think that brings us to a fascinating point of convergence, even if we arrive there from completely different philosophical starting points.
I agree.
We both agree absolutely on the urgent need to deliberately protect hobby time. We must treat it with the same reverence as a professional appointment. We have to fiercely defend that unmonetized time from the creep of urgent work demands.
Absolutely.
And, perhaps most importantly, We must collectively resist this relentless cultural pressure to turn every quiet talent into a TikTok channel, a side hustle, or an Etsy shop.
Precisely. We have to flip the script from passive consumption to active production. We need to log off the endless scroll and engage the physical world, whether that is planting a garden, restoring a bicycle, or writing a poem that no one will ever read.
Right. The act of making and doing mechanically restores the brain in a way that simply consuming content can never accomplish.
Yet our core disagreement remains unresolved, and perhaps it should. There is a deep, ongoing tension regarding the ultimate purpose of that leisure time. I maintain that we must fiercely protect our hobbies as a glorious exercise in absolute uselessness.
And I maintain that they are anything but useless. To me, they are the last remaining sanctuary from the market, a watertight compartment where we are allowed to be vulnerable, incompetent, and utterly free from the demand to grow or optimize.
And to me, embracing them as useless sells human potential short. Hobbies are a vital, synergistic engine for holistic self-development. They demand patience. They require us to scale the wall of mastery. And in doing so, they provide the cognitive diversity and resilience that make us infinitely more capable in every other domain of our lives.
What is clear is that navigating human attention and figuring out what it means to truly rest is incredibly complex. Reclaiming ownership of your mind in the modern era requires a deliberate choice. You have to decide for yourself what metric truly matters in your unmonetized hours.
Indeed. It requires recognizing that the time you spend deeply absorbed in something you love is never wasted, regardless of how the outside world tries to measure it.
So the next time you sit down on your couch with that out-of-tune guitar or that lump of clay, and you feel the ghost of the efficiency expert sit down beside you with his clipboard, ask yourself, will you try to prove to him that what you're doing has hidden synergistic value, or will you look him in the eye, play a chord that sounds like a dying cat, and simply tell him to get out of your house?